Good morning, everyone, and welcome to TBR's webcast, Network Function Virtualization, Where's the Business Case? Highlighting the shift towards virtualization. My name is Allison Crawford, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. Operators are offering more cloud services which require significant data center investment, and to achieve this transition, operators must also invest in network function virtualization technologies. During the course of this presentation, Executive Analyst Michael Sullivan-Trainor will discuss his perceptions of this trend and highlight initial research findings. Before I pass this over to Michael, there are a few logistics I'd like to cover. First, we're recording today's session and we'll be posting it on our YouTube site, TBRI channel. We encourage you to visit our channel to watch this presentation or any of the others that we've posted. Second, we'd like to hear your opinions and thoughts on the materials we're presenting. Please send any questions or comments to the Q&A or chat function. Michael will address them at the end of the presentation. Or if you'd like to set up a client inquiry for more detailed discussion, please reach out directly to either Michael or myself at the end of the presentation to set up that discussion. Third, we'll send out the slides to everyone registered for today's webcast within 24 hours of the conclusion of the webinar. You can also find these slides as well as other thought leadership pieces, webinar decks, and commentaries on SlideShare at www.slideshare.net/TBR_market_insight, and we'll share all the social media links with you again at the end of the presentation. Now let me introduce Michael Sullivan-Trainor. For the last 7 years, Michael has covered the telecom vendor and service provider landscape. He has extensive insight into emerging trends and is the content and consulting lead for the networking and mobility practice. He is frequently called upon by our clients to provide strategic insight to help navigate the shifting market landscape. And with that, let me hand this over to Michael.
Thank you very much, Allison, and thank you everyone for joining the webinar. Today we're going to talk about network function virtualization, understand where we are to date with the technology shift that it represents, where we've been, and where we're going. Particular attention here to where the early investments are being made and what is required to make the key investment driver of network functionalization, virtualization, the business case, realized. So first I want to talk about network function virtualization from the standpoint of the hype cycle. As we have all seen, the technology or the trend behind NFV has gone through a tremendous amount of new attention, new initiatives, even as recently as last year. Where we began was a realization that NFV coming out of the IT side of the infrastructure was something that could be applied to the telco application environment. And really a stake in the ground was put in place by the European Standards Institute industry specification group for NFV with the white paper and the ongoing working process. But very much saw a marketing of what we call NFV washing of almost any initiative and any product was promised to be attributable to NFV through the year of 2013. And not yet, in our perspective, has NFV gotten real. We expect through the course of 2015 there will be, or 2014 into 2015, there will be more real implementations that we can point to moving to some production. And with that, there will be the consequent challenges come from trying to implement the technology. So we believe there'll be a painful dip in expectations around NFV. But as you can see by the curve, over time, the perspective is that we're going to see a realization of NFV to provide some of the real benefits that operators are looking for. In this presentation, we're going to look more specifically at some of these joints in the journey as well as the ultimate expectations and goals of the operators. Taking one more look at that in this next slide is really to think about it in terms of investment. So we just tracked what can be seen as the hype cycle of the marketing. How does that relate to the spend that we are tracking for the operators? And we see that other than conference sessions, not a lot of money was spent in the early years of NFV until we came to the proof of concept stage. So even though we were accusing the market of NFV washing, there was definitely a significant amount of proof of concept activity through the year of 2013. And we believe 2014, where we are now going forward, is really going to be the year of trials, and alongside the trials, the determination of actual business case value, so that the operators will be stimulated to begin making actual project spend on a significant scale going into 2015 and 2016. And then, of course, following that cycle of the new technology introduction, we're going to struggle with pulling back on some projects that might have been too ambitious before settling to a resumption of consistent spending in NFV. And what I mean by that is we really do see NFV becoming the primary technology direction for how the operators are going to spend on technology going forward across the multiple layers that can be addressed by NFV. So it becomes the way in which the specifications need to be applied, and there'll be a lot of transition from CapEx spent on legacy to CapEx and OpEx spent on NFV. We'll come later on to talk about where that CapEx and OpEx will be applied and how it is different from how it's been being applied today. Just so we're on the same page, slide 6 here shows what is our view of the definition of NFV coming out of the standards group. Focus really on the ability to create an independent software layer of virtual functions that can be distributed across standard hardware, essentially commodity hardware, both at the storage level and at the server level. And the critical piece is probably the piece in the middle of that diagram, the orchestration and automation, in order to achieve a lot of the value of that virtualization. And so it really requires targeting a large number of different elements and bringing about a comprehensive change to the architecture of the service provider. And unlike what it may be seen as in the IT world, definitely has to be carrier grade, highly reliable, scalable, the ability to apply security at the important areas of the network still. And not only does it have to do that, but it also has to be, from the operator's perspective, a vehicle for CapEx reduction and at least operational efficiency, but probably primarily down the road, the ability to introduce or innovate on services faster, so service agility. These are the founding principles of NFV, and I think they form a good basis for investment direction, both on a technical basis and on a business case basis. And we highlight here some of the membership of the industry specification group, which started off with a small cadre of high-profile members and now has more than 100 members who are driving the use cases in this initiative. So that was the definition from the standards group's viewpoint. Our research says the operators are actually interested in a bit more specific definition that ties to their business requirements. And so here we have the benefits that the operators are looking for and what we feel that implies for the NFV process. Chief among them, as I mentioned, is rapid service innovation, and as a result, the operator is actually looking for decreased time to deliver a service into the market. That is a key transformation that the technology is expected to deliver, and it needs to be done through the means of implementing services end-to-end across the operator's infrastructure, and it will be done via software-based deployment. So an end-to-end software-based deployment with significant automation and orchestration is not an easy thing to deliver, but it is, I consider to be the chief deliverable that's being sought by the operators out of NFV. In addition to that, there is the listing here of the operational efficiency expectation, both from less cost for service deployment, the automation standardization and common procedures is targeted at that. Reduced OpEx for energy, so we're getting a green effect from NFV, less power consumption by means of more selective hardware use, migrating workloads into virtual instances and requiring less hardware to support them. Interestingly, their operators are also very much expecting this not to be a single vendor world. It may be a 2 or 3 vendor world, but in an ideal case, many of them are looking for the ability to use the standardization to employ best-of-breed solutions where they like. So some of the fundamental infrastructure may be based on the 2 or 3 key suppliers, but then being able to shift in different kinds of network functions that can conform to standard open interfaces across a common management environment might allow for more best-of-breed choice to come into the marketplace, and that is a critical connection between that thought and the service innovation thought, believing that it may be a new player on the market that offers the best opportunity for service innovation. Operators want to have an architecture that can comply to that very easily. And also, of course, continue to be more vendor independent and less than vendor dependent. And I put last, but not least in a lot of what we hear about NFV is the reduction in hardware CapEx through the elimination of a number of the dedicated hardware implementations. So we see the NFV menu for delivering the benefits and the requirements to deliver them is actually quite ambitious and built very much from a delivery of service point of view rather than an internal, a pure just internal efficiency and CapEx reduction point of view. Let's get a little bit more granular here and talk about what are some of the use cases where NFV is seen to be of value. This again comes from the industry standard specification and is highlighted by the quote from the Deutsche Telekom team, really talking about the two components, the best of breed virtual function across a purpose-built hardware platform that offers a virtual instance of that function and the necessary management and orchestration. That can be applied to these use cases, and we'll start with some of the ones that perhaps are quote-unquote easier, and that would be looking at the cloud-based services, infrastructure as a service, software as a service, and platform as a service is areas where virtualization, of course, is required to make it a cloud-based service and can be delivered for outbound applications by the service provider. We're already seeing a lot of this today. An interesting nuance, I think, is the specification of infrastructure as a service, also including network as a service, not just compute and storage, which we've seen on the IT side. And that has a different flavor, of course, for the service provider and suggests being able to implement quality of service on the network as a criteria for IIS in some cases. And of course, the flavors of software and platform can be applied to traditional telco applications as well as innovative telco applications. A key difference in how the operator is looking at network function virtualization is to understand that the inner working of an end-to-end system of virtual functions is critical to be successful. And since we are now talking about logical functions rather than physical functions, we need the virtual network forwarding capability to interwork logical functions to deliver NFV. So that itself is a rather complex use case that's necessary to deliver an end-to-end solution, but definitely a requirement. Beyond that, as you can see from the list, we have nearly every area of the network being affected by NFV with a potential use case everywhere from the mobile core, including EPC and IMS elements, to areas of the RAN in terms of the base station, how to make the base station capacity more easily available and centralized, the virtualization of endpoints in the home, the virtualization of aggregation points through the content delivery network, and the virtualization of endpoints in the fixed access network as well. So the mix of bringing efficiency through network function virtualization at the endpoints and the ability to move functions to the network and have an end-to-end service delivery value are some of the key things that run as threads throughout these use cases, and again bring down some of the benefits that we are highlighting here in terms of efficiency, in terms on the cost side, and in terms of service innovation, service delivery efficiency. But that's not all. There are, of course, a number of other elements in the network, and operators are actively looking at other use cases as our suppliers. Use cases around security, around optimization of the packet transport and optimization of areas of OSS, BSS. A lot of individual functions within many of these categories that together become part of a sub-network of virtualization that is connected to the end-to-end service delivery solution. I just highlight here, for instance, that policy control, we see some early movement on policy control because implementation of policy control has been somewhat less robust, perhaps, than it could be, and the ability to have a more flexible deployment of policy as a virtual function may, in fact, accelerate the ability to deliver policy control at different areas in the network than it was previously. Similarly, we see elements such as session border controllers that have discrete functions but are key to end-to-end networking are also some of the early offerings for NFV, and those are what I like to think of as maybe more doable instances of NFV, and they already have a value and a role in the network by virtue of being more easily distributed and managed as an part of the end-to-end solution. So that's why they're also receiving attention. But in our time scale, the use cases we've talked about previously, as well as the use cases related to this slide, are all going to comprise that transformation of the network that will take place via network function virtualization. So let's take a brief look at where some of the initiatives lie, what some of the operators are doing. Here we have some exemplar operators, three of very large operators in both global and national markets. The AT&T's second edition of its domain policy explicitly stated moving to network function virtualization as its spec for suppliers going forward. So that's clearly the kind of initiative that's going to drive a lot of this transformation within AT&T and as a leadership position for other operators. As a follow-up to that, all these operators are engaged in some kind of proof of concept, and they are taking different stances to how they believe NFV will be brought into them based on their cultural biases. So we see AT&T is trying to calibrate on an industry standard solution. They are probably a good example of the kind of supplier that wants to have best of breed introduction into a standards environment to drive that service innovation. Contrasted with Verizon, which typically is looking to be its own innovative engine, build its own solution really more close to the network value. And so they tend to look for point solutions that can interwork with the way they're building out their NFV infrastructure with the help of suppliers, of course, but there's a heavy flavor of internal development and control of the network on the Verizon side. And we consider Vodafone somewhere in between as an example. Definitely looking for industry standard solutions, but also with a significant amount of integration into their unique offers. So Vodafone, globally, and Vodafone as a collection of many national markets needs to be much more targeted how it takes a technology like this and spreads it into each of its particular areas based on the business case. So each of these represents an interestingly different business case and technical challenge for the supplier to meet some of the initiatives towards NFV transformation. If we look at some of the suppliers and their positions, we see that NFV is really growing out of the cloud system or cloud platform approach. Think about starting with SDN, software-defined networking, or just a straightforward IT-based, IT-oriented cloud platform. And the leading suppliers in that are then quickly, or have quickly in the past year, moved to a way to translate that into an NFV proposition. This particular list, more systems suppliers that are going to be looking to be that one or two or three domain player that owns the platform, provides the management orchestration, and perhaps is the host for NFV virtual functions for their own software units or for units of third parties. These are the companies that we will be continuing to focus on as the jockeying for that position. And we see here coming out of a cloud band initiative, Alcatel-Lucent has already delivered on management orchestration platforms and has recently moved that proposition to an NFV position within its ecosystem of business partners, and we expect more NFV-related propositions and examples coming from Alcatel-Lucent. But the other vendors aren't sitting still. They're all responding with some version of NFV on their cloud infrastructure. And I would just highlight NSN being a bit more targeted than that, really saying we're going to look at less directly at cloud, being the cloud platform for everyone. We're going to be the virtualization specialist in the network infrastructure. So we see LiquidNet, which is the virtualization of the network elements, the core and areas of the RAN or the base stations, as we talked about, and IMS platforms as well. So they're definitely targeting that a network level of virtualization, where we may see another supplier targeting the onboarding of new kinds of service functions. This is not an easy problem to solve from a supplier standpoint. This particular slide suggests that maybe the packaging of an NFV solution is different than the packaging of a traditional solution. And the first criteria, say, put out by an AT&T that says we will be interested in best of breed, or a criteria put out by Verizon, we have our own infrastructure we've built, can you work with that, suggests a significant amount of flexibility required by the supplier, with the operator saying, is it standards compliant? Is it our flavor of standards compliant? That's really nothing new. But then it might not be the server you came with. It might be another server that's been the choice. It might be it might not be the abstraction platform you came with. It might be another third-party abstraction platform. And maybe you're coming from the other end. You're the third-party hardware supplier, or you're the abstraction supplier, and you're the one bringing in the virtual function. So there's really a lot of mix and match, and so the licensing and support models have to be very discreetly built on each of these layers of the functions that are brought to bear into the operator network, and then very significant negotiations around who's going to be responsible for certifying these functions are going to work together in end-to-end infrastructure. And so those players that are looking to become the dominant NFV, translating some of their position from traditional legacy network into NFV, have to really be cognizant of operating in a much more orchestration of standards-based platforms environment than they have perhaps in the past, where there were more room for having a legacy that had less requirement for mix and match from third parties, from software, and from internal development. That said, we see some models out there, session-based licensing and third-party certification for individual functions has already happened. We're seeing it in, for instance, in the policy market, as I mentioned. Some of the discrete functions is where we're seeing some first movement on defining that business model by the supplier. Not yet end-to-end, much more complicated, scalable functions, a multi-function network. So that is to come, and we'll be tracking that very closely. Here we want to talk about, again, another supplier impact, which is where is the investment going and where is it going away from. So if we take those propositions that the service provider has put into the marketplace, decreasing the time to market, reducing OpEx, reducing CapEx, increasing vendor independence, what areas of the network are the suppliers' lines of business really will be affected? And we believe that professional and managed services are going to receive a boost from network function virtualization, definitely initially, and perhaps over time just a larger share, simply because the newness of the architecture, the transformational nature of the architecture requires consultative work with the service provider, requires a new design and technical architecture specification. And of course, once that's accomplished, the movement toward actual implementation integration work of network function virtualization elements. And I won't think this is going to be a big hit for an individual function that gets virtualized. The big hit's going to be, as I mentioned, making this a scalable end-to-end network for service delivery across multiple functions is really going to require significant amount of support from third-party service firms. In addition to that opportunity, there will be those operators that think that this is not of a significant value for their own investment. They just don't have the capability to invest that kind of competency, so it will create an outsourcing and outtasking opportunity as well. And we may see a boost in managed services for discrete functions, much as we've seen outtasking, or perhaps whole networks again with an NFV flavor, at least in a transitory stage, if not a permanent stage, for many of the operators that just don't have the competency or the trust in the standardization process to make it happen without some secure SLA from the service provider that's going to, the supplier that's going to drive it for them. The place that we think will take a hit is deployment and maintenance services, and that's simply because it is a less challenging proposition to implement software than hardware. We're not seeing a lot of boxes that need to be rolled out for high-scale capacity. We are seeing a complexity of software installation. A lot of the value capture of the software installation is going to be taken up through the integration function, then we put that in the professional services bucket. So that's why we're seeing a pullout of value from deployment and maintenance services. We also see consolidation on the operations side through automation and management systems. So this is again a reason why we're going to see less spend on what has been thought of traditionally as deployment and maintenance services. On the mixed bucket of CapEx, definitely increase in software revenue, both from the standpoint of software revenue for new versions of existing software now manifest as virtual functions, and a new layer of management and orchestration software that's going to be required to make end-to-end network function virtualization work, and a consequent decrease in CapEx for hardware, fewer servers, more commodity servers, what the operators like to call a rationalization of network equipment. Let's select what we need to have in a virtual environment and reduce our investment in specialty hardware for that. So that's a summary of how the spend we believe will shake out. And in our CapEx and OpEx models, we're moving forward with tracking how that migration of spend is essentially what it is from legacy to NFV is going to take place. Now let's come to the business case. What is a simplified view of how the business case will shake out here? What can we count on, or can the operator count on, and where is the uncertainty that's yet to be determined? So I call it a test of faith at this point because no large production scale operator, telco grade scale NFV end-to-end network has yet come to the marketplace. And so we're waiting to find out whether or not there will be truly the benefits realized. It is easy to see that the costs are going to be pretty directly borne through higher CapEx, as we talked about, through higher professional services, CapEx and OpEx. So the costs are going to be pretty easy to define upfront in managing a business case. Quantifying the benefits, the one that may be most likely to define the decreased hardware CapEx and the decreased traditional deployment maintenance costs will be manifest, but at the end of the day, will the operator be looking at a situation where they have not gained anything? They've implemented greater costs, just simply transferred hardware costs and deployment maintenance costs to software and professional services costs. If that were the case, it would be not a successful implementation, and I think when we see the dip in our future curve, there's a danger that happens, and there'll be a pull away of enthusiasm, shall we say, from the NFV marketplace if that happens. What I think is incumbent upon the operator and the supplier is to solve the area of this view that's labeled uncertain. Can operational costs really be decreased across the function, across a multi-function network to deliver a service? Can revenue be derived from faster provisioning? That is to say, the customer gets its time to money from the customer faster. Can revenue be derived from innovative services? Can new services be onboarded that couldn't be before or more rapidly than before? Those potential increased revenue from faster provisioning, and potential increased revenue from innovative service are critical, as are decreased operation costs for NFV to really carry a promise of being more than simply a changeover in the underlying technical infrastructure. Let's take a look at this from the standpoint of one of the use cases. We chose here one of the ones that's been more, shall we say, easy to implement, again, quotes around that, the virtualization of the home environment. This targets the endpoints of the residential gateway and the set-top box in a typical broadband home environment of delivering video and other services. What do we see? Where do we see? Let's test our OpEx and CapEx alterations. Is an increase in software? Yes, the software functions that are virtualized are now sitting on the network and being withdrawn from the RGW and the STB. Essentially, we're dumbing down those boxes in this scenario and moving the functions to the network. So the network investment in the complexity of virtualized software instances is present, so that cost goes up, as does the service implementation to get that done. We can see a lower cost on the boxes themselves, the endpoints, so a decrease in hardware CapEx likely, as well as the expense of deploying that. And where the business case is driven in this particular approach is that we know that there are hundreds of thousands or maybe millions of endpoint boxes being deployed or needing to be deployed for different kinds of service functions in the home. If we can reduce that to a smaller number of boxes that are easier to deploy, then we can see there will be a cost savings. The question is who benefits from that cost savings. Depends on who pays for that box. In many cases, it's the residential subscriber that's paying for the box as part of their service, in which case the service provider doesn't get immediate value and would have to re-examine the business model to understand how to get the value extracted from that change, either by a different offer to the consumer or a different way to build a consumer for that value that's now being taken out of the network. We do see potentially decreased operational costs, again, with a layer of management and orchestration across different instances of the feature set that's going to service the home network, being managed at the network level rather than at the box level. But we believe the real value here, just to carry it out as the previous example hypothetically was talking about, in this case, what new services can be delivered into this environment? What can be provisioned now from a network standpoint and more quickly delivered to the endpoints than could be done before? What enhancements to video services, context-based services bring to bear a lot of the operators' traditional embedded services value? How can they be brought to bear in this scenario now that they're being serviced out of the network instead of being dependent on the functionality of the end box? Answering that question is key, and what we've seen in some of the early proof of concept of the virtualization of the home environment is essentially the first two things are happening: costs being pulled out for traditional spend, benefits of the changeover in hardware, but not yet really a monetization via new service innovation. And we think that's a critical area where we expect to see development in the coming further trials and proof of concepts on these use cases. So to wrap up, we are looking at a period of history where there's a multi-step process in making network function virtualization more real. We're moving from proof of concept to field trials and lab tests on a more deep level to understand what technical issues need to be overcome and what business cases are being more likely to be of value. And that's going to determine where investments are going to be made. We see a strong contribution required in being made by the suppliers to hone the business case in parallel with determining the best product packaging. And I think the best efforts at that are going to be based on these ecosystem initiatives, because is going to be bringing together best of breed together with an individual supplier solution in order to understand the standardization the operator is actually looking for, the orchestration and the delivery of an end-to-end solution across multiple functions. And ultimately, over time, we'll see that the most likely use cases are going to be the ones that offer the strongest business cases, and they'll achieve a deployment velocity and become the area where the investment in NFV becomes driven by. That hasn't fully emerged yet. As we observed, there's a number of use cases that require still a lot of time to be understood from a business case and value perspective. Before we move on to Q&A, I want to highlight TBR's current work in network function virtualization. As I mentioned, we're continuing to track it embedded in our services view as suppliers roll out NFV in offers in their lines of business. How is that being monetized and packaged? As operators make those investments, how is their CapEx and OpEx beginning to migrate to these different kinds of propositions? When are we going to really see those shifts in spend as we move past the capacity builds and focus more on the virtualization of our network infrastructure? We'll be using vehicles like this, what we're calling the Network Function Virtualization Dashboard, where we're tracking the business case adoption for service providers. We'll be doing a continued look at who the leading suppliers are from an NFV platform perspective, what some of their best practices are, and who the first movers are, and examining it on those two axes here, the brave new world of packaging on one hand, and the ability to manifest the true promise of orchestration, automation, and operational efficiency, and that the operators are requesting. So this will be something we'll be producing on a quarterly basis and tracking the industry, as well as offering these kinds of webinars to give an update on where we see the market moving. So with that, I'll move over to back to Allison for Q&A.
Great. Thanks, Michael, and thanks to those who have sent through questions. The first question we have, Michael, was actually in reference to one of the slides that you were going over in terms of operators and suppliers. And the question was, is this a global perspective or U.S.-centric?
So the perspective is global. The examples were a bit U.S., although Vodafone was in there. By that I mean some of the initiatives in NFV are coming from a non-U.S. suppliers, maybe and operators even more aggressively than in the U.S. For example, Deutsche Telekom may be seen as one of the leaders and points to those firms that are operators that are first embracing SDN and then moving on to NFV are some of the best places to look for where their leadership will come from. And similarly, some of the early efforts of some of the Asian suppliers actually towards virtualization coming out of cloud infrastructure are worth looking at as leadership as well. So we are looking at the market on a global basis.
Okay. The next question we have is, how do you position NFV versus software-defined data center?
Right. So in many ways, there's been a lot of frustrating confusion, I suppose, from my perspective, between software-defined networking and NFV. So simple terms is software-defined networking is the underlying routing and switching layered virtualization platform. So how you move the control from a hardwired routing and switching environment to a software-defined environment. And that creates a virtual view of that. On top of that connectivity layer, then, are virtual functions. So we get instances of virtual network functions that can ride on top of a robust SDN environment. And I think the two of them are going hand in hand and being developed in parallel, although the SDN initiative is moving ahead. And as far as the word data center, a lot of this takes place in the data center. I mean, we do have endpoint network function virtualization, but a lot of the environment of the data center needs to have a virtualized networking infrastructure that's an SDN-based infrastructure, and it will be running on top of that virtual network functions in the service delivery environment. So similar, we're not disrupting any of the layered networking requirements or stack that is present. We're just seeing virtualization at multiple levels.
Okay. We had a follow-up. I'm waiting to get clarification back on a follow-up on that question, Michael. Just bear with me. The next question we had come through was, does NFV offer more benefit to mobile operators than to fixed operators?
I would say at this stage, apparently so, only because there is more evidence of NFV delivery, delivering value or delivering capability. Hesitate to say value yet. We have to see that, but value at different layers of the mobile infrastructure to reposition capacity, as we saw, and strengthen the capacity capability of the individual base stations, make the mobile core more flexible, and provide different ways to deliver service innovation. Where in the fixed network, there's only so much can be done with the fixed endpoints to make them more efficient, and we're already having a reduced layer of functionality in the fixed network. So it's less, I think, to be done from an operational impact on the fixed side than the mobile side.
Okay. Next question we have. Okay, so the clarification just came back, and so the person who has a question about software-defined data center. You talked a lot about software-defined networking. He said you wanted to hear more about software-defined data center. The person said, I think NFV is one of the use cases of software-defined data center. I was just hoping to have Mike's view. So Mike, maybe you can go into a little more detail around software-defined data center.
I will take that one under advisement and get back to you. I would suggest it is the combination of a complete end-to-end data center that requires both the implementation of SDN in the network infrastructure and network function virtualization. And when we say that, I am speaking in the context of the telco. And so there we're talking about when we say a telco's data center is basically a collection of network functions, right? So it's a combination there, but it would be implementing virtualization layer across those layers of infrastructure in the data center. But I think I might perhaps have some colleagues here that are more focused on pure data center that perhaps can give you a more depth of response. And so maybe if you email that question to us, we can come back to you with more specifics.
Okay, I'll take care of that. The next question we had come through, Mike, is which mobile functions are being virtualized, and is it territory dependent?
So we're seeing elements of the Evolved Traffic Core being virtualized. We're seeing areas of the base stations being virtualized, and we're seeing areas of the service layer or the enablement layer, IMS, and other functions being virtualized. Not territory dependent that I can see. They can be self-contained. I think that coordination, as I've been pointing out in the presentation, we're at that point about delivering a network function virtualization instance for a given environment, a given controlled environment as a POC or a trial, and then taking that and extending it across a region or across an operator's network. I haven't seen that yet. The inner working and a lot of the choice about what to virtualize, what not to virtualize, I don't think that's been made beyond a theoretical basis. So I'm looking to see how that develops as the suppliers continue to work that issue.
Okay. The next question we had come through. We have seen similar infrastructure changes that haven't panned out. How is NFV different?
Right. So one of the things that comes to mind from my experience in the industry is to have been an IMS watcher for a number of years, and we certainly saw the hype cycle for IMS, and then the almost a distancing of the operator interest in IMS, and ultimately a resumption of IMS value through its association with LTE and fixed mobile convergence solutions. So what that translates to me is why I brought forward this notion of business case drives technology. Ultimately, the business case of delivering the kind of services that can be deployed via FMC or via LTE drove the interest in moving IMS back to front and center of operator network delivery service enablement. And so I think it's going to be similar for network function virtualization. I'm looking for those salient business case drivers. Will it be policy? Will it be capacity? Will it be service innovation in multimedia or some other over-the-top related service? Don't know yet, but I'm looking for that. I think that's going to make it significant. That said, where it's different is I've not seen the level of activity from standards groups getting straight down to use cases and virtual overnight transformation of the industry to drive in this direction, let alone a major supplier or a major operator say, I'm going to become the virtual function leader. So that's AT&T on the case in point for the operator and NSN for the case in point on the supplier. So we're at a time in the marketplace where people really do need to turn their business models towards what's next, because what's been the legacy is not producing the kind of economics that are necessary. So I think that's how it's different. We're living in a different time, and there's a lot more momentum behind this kind of change than was behind some prior instances.
Okay. Next question we have come through. Where do you think NFV will first be implemented in production networks?
As I said, it's going to be a case of where the business case is discovered. So one short answer to that is it's going to be implemented where it's easiest. So will there be value capture, and will there be a relatively simple business case based on lower cost capability? So we see areas of the service enablement elements, areas of OSS, BSS elements where it's feasible and quote unquote easy to do, or easier to do than getting into the network and trying to find out how to interwork across the instances of virtual network functions in the delivery of network traffic or network services versus being able to layer in the service over the top. That kind of choice is going to make it more likely that it'll be implemented in the service layer first. But we're going to see where the business case nets out to see what drives that spend, where the operators see it's going to make the most sense to place their bets.
Okay, we have one more question, so if anybody has any additional questions, now is the time to send them through. Last question we have right now, Michael, is which operators are most likely to lead in NFV deployments?
Right, I already referred to this earlier. Those that are first moving forward with SDN, I think, tend to be a good barometer for leadership, simply because that requires a similar change in thinking, view towards standardization, view towards understanding some of the cost and benefit issues, getting a business case down there, being able to extend that business case to an NFV environment. And again, I come back to Deutsche Telekom as a good example of that, really the operator that's saying I'm an SDN operator, and pretty quickly moving to I'm an NFV, an SDN operator. And so those kinds of cases are going to be some of the first movers where the companies decided to place a strategic bet on the combination. They need the efficiency and they need the capability to deliver that agility, that service innovation, and the market may be more pressed for that kind of differentiation on that kind of cost savings than some of the other markets where the legacy environment is performing just fine. It'll be harder to drive that business case.
Okay, great. We don't have any additional questions in queue, so with that, I'm going to start wrapping up the webinar. I wanted to draw your attention to the last slides in the deck. As we said, we're going to be sending out all of these slides to everyone by tomorrow. The last slide on the deck gives you a good view of all the research that Michael and his team are doing in both NFV as well as all of networking and mobility. So if there's any interest in any of the research that they're doing, please feel free to reach out to Michael or myself to get more information about that. As I mentioned, I was going to share all the social media links with you, so I encourage you to follow both Michael as well as TBR at the Twitter handles listed here, and to join the conversation on SlideShare and YouTube. As I mentioned, you can share these links to anyone in your organization that you feel would get value from any of the content that Michael has presented today. On your way out of the webinar, we do have a quick 3-question survey. We're getting information on how valuable was the presentation and the content, how good was the presenter, and if there's any other open-ended feedback you'd like to share with us. We are using this feedback to change our presentations and our research agenda quarter to quarter, so any feedback that you do share with us is greatly appreciated. I'm going to leave the chat function open for another minute or two in case there's any last-minute questions you'd like to ask Michael, or if there's any follow-up conversations you'd like to schedule, please send them through now. And if we don't hear from you during this webinar, please be on the lookout for additional thought leadership pieces that Michael is working on, as well as other webinars that we'll be scheduling over the next several weeks. So with that, I'd like to say thanks to everyone who attended, and we look forward to engaging with you going forward. Have a great day, everyone.